Consumer sentiment just hit levels we haven't seen since the Great Depression. Not 2008, not COVID, the 1930s. And here's what's insane. The stock market is at all-time highs. Unemployment is under 4%. GDP is growing. By every official metric, the economy is fine. But 50% of Americans say they're worse off than they were 4 years ago. Credit card debt just hit $1.2 trillion. Delinquencies are spiking. People are choosing between groceries and rent. So what's actually happening? How can the economy be booming while half the country is drowning? The answer is something economists have been warning about for years, but nobody wanted to believe. The K-shaped recovery, where half the economy goes up and half goes down. And the gap between them is widening every single day. And by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly how this happened, why it's accelerating, and what it means for your financial future. Because this isn't temporary, this is the new normal. And if you're on the wrong side of the K, you're about to find out just how bad it can get. Let me show you something that should terrify you. The University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index just dropped to 50.8. To put that in perspective, during the depths of the 2008 financial crisis, it hit 55. During COVID lockdowns, it bottomed at 71. We're below the financial crisis, below the dot-com crash, below the 1980s recession. The only time sentiment was this low was during the Great Depression. But here's what doesn't make sense. In 2008, unemployment hit 10%. Banks were failing. The stock market crashed 57%. In 2020, businesses shut down, 20 million jobs vanished overnight. Right now, unemployment is 3.7%. The S&P 500 is at 6,000. Corporate profits are at record highs. Apple just posted earnings that beat a small country's GDP. So why do people feel like it's 1933? Because for half of America, it is. And the data proves it. Bank of America just released research showing the economy is split into two completely separate realities. They call it the K-shaped economy. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The top 20% of earners, households making over 150K, they're doing better than ever. Their wages are up. Their investments are up. Their home values are up. They're taking vacations, buying new cars, living like nothing changed. The bottom 80%, they're getting crushed. Real wages are down after inflation. Savings are depleted. Credit cards are maxed. They're one unexpected expense away from financial disaster. It's not one economy anymore. It's two economies living in completely different realities. And the gap is accelerating. Let me show you exactly how we got here. Because this didn't happen by accident. In March 2020, COVID hit. The economy shut down. 20 million jobs vanished in 1 month. It was the fastest economic collapse in history. The Federal Reserve responded by printing $4 trillion in 18 months. The government sent stimulus checks, extended unemployment, paused student loans, halted evictions. Money flooded the system. And for about 18 months, it worked. Unemployment dropped. Consumer spending recovered. The stock market went vertical. But here's what nobody told you. That money didn't go to everyone equally. It went primarily to people who already had money. If you owned stocks in March 2020, you made a fortune. The S&P doubled from the bottom by December 2021. If you had money in the market, your wealth exploded. If you owned a house, you won the lottery. Home prices went up 40% in 2 years. If you bought in 2020, you locked in a 3% mortgage and watched your home values skyrocket. If you owned a business or had capital to invest, you cleaned up. Asset prices went vertical. Everything from stocks to real estate to crypto to art to collectibles doubled or tripled. But if you didn't own assets, if you were living paycheck to paycheck, if you had no investments, no house, no capital, you got inflation. That's the key. The money printing created inflation. But inflation hits different groups completely differently. If you own assets, inflation makes you richer. Your house goes up, your stocks go up, your business value goes up, your debt gets inflated away, you're winning. If you don't own assets, inflation destroys you. Your rent goes up, your groceries cost more, your gas doubles, your wages can't keep up, you're drowning. And that's exactly what happened. From 2020 to 2024, we had one of the largest wealth transfers in history. Upward. From people without assets to people with assets. Let me give you the numbers because this is where it gets really dark. The top 1% of Americans saw their net worth increase by $30 trillion from 2020 to 2024. $30 trillion. That's more wealth creation than happened in the entire decade before COVID. The bottom 50%, their collective net worth went down. After counting for inflation, they're poorer now than they were in 2019. So when you see headlines saying the economy is great, they're technically right. For the people who own assets, it's the best economy ever. But for everyone else, it's a nightmare. And it's getting worse. Here's where the K-shape becomes crystal clear. Let's look at what actually happened to prices over the last 4 years. Groceries are up 25% since 2020, but that's the average. Eggs went up 60% at the peak, chicken up 40%, bread up 30%, housing costs are up 35% on average. Rent in major cities is up 40 to 50%. If you're trying to buy a house, prices are up 40%, and mortgage rates went from 3% to 7%. Your monthly payment doubled. Car insurance is up 50%. Used cars peaked at 40% higher. Gas hit $5 in many areas, double from 2020. Healthcare costs up 20%. Childcare up 30%. College tuition still climbing. Now let's look at wages. The average worker's wage went up 18% from 2020 to 2024. That sounds good until you realize inflation was 20%. You're making more dollars, but buying less stuff. You got a pay cut disguised as a raise, but here's where it splits. If you're in the top 20%, if you're in tech, finance, healthcare, your wages went up 25 to 30%. You beat inflation, you're actually better off. If you're in the bottom 80%, if you're in retail, food service, manufacturing, your wages went up 12 to 15%. You got destroyed by inflation. You're significantly worse off. The K-shape is wages beating inflation for the top, wages losing to inflation for everyone else. Now let's look at wealth. This is where it becomes absolutely brutal. If you owned a house in 2020, your net worth went up by an average of $150K just from home equity. You did nothing. Your house just depreciated. If you had $100K in the stock market in 2020, it became $200K by 2021. Again, you did nothing. Assets inflated. But if you were renting and didn't own stocks, which is about 40% of Americans, your rent went up 40% and you have nothing to show for it. Pure wealth destruction. The people who had assets in 2020 are now millionaires or richer. The people who didn't have assets in 2020 are now drowning in debt just trying to survive. That's the K. One group went up, one group went down. And the gap is now wider than any point since the Gilded Age. Let me show you what this looks like in real terms because the numbers are abstract. Let me make it concrete. Meet two households, both making $60K in 2019, middle class, similar lives. Household A owns a small home they bought in 2015, has a modest 401K, maybe $50K in the stock market. Household B rents, no investments, living paycheck to paycheck but making it work. Fast forward to 2025. Household A's house went from $250K to $350K. Their 401K doubled to $100K. Their mortgage payment stayed at $1,200 because they locked in 3%. Their net worth went from $100K to $300K in 5 years. They're wealthy now. They're taking vacations, thinking about buying a rental property. Life is good. Household B's rent went from $1,200 to $1,800. Their grocery bill went from $400 to $600. Their car insurance doubled. They're making a bit more money, maybe $70K now, but after inflation, they're making less. They have no savings. Credit cards are maxed, one medical emergency, and they're bankrupt. They're worse off than 2019, despite working harder. Same starting point. 5 years later, completely different realities. That's the K-shaped economy. And here's the part that should make you furious. This wasn't accidental. This was the design. When the Fed printed $4 trillion and the government sent checks, they knew what would happen. They knew asset owners would benefit most. They knew inflation would hit non-asset owners hardest. They did it anyway, because the alternative was letting the economy collapse in 2020. And politically, that wasn't acceptable. So they chose inflation. They chose to save asset prices at the expense of purchasing power. They chose to bail out homeowners and investors and let renters and workers pay for it through higher prices. It was a deliberate policy choice. And the people who made that choice all own assets. So they're fine. Now let's talk about what's happening right now, because this is where it gets really concerning. The K-shape isn't stabilizing, it's accelerating. The gap is widening every single month. Credit card debt just hit $1.2 trillion. That's an all-time high. Delinquencies on credit cards are spiking. People are missing payments at rates we haven't seen since 2010. Auto loan delinquencies are rising. Student loan payments restarted and people can't afford them. Personal loan defaults are climbing. Meanwhile, the stock market just hit all-time highs. Home prices are still climbing in most markets. Corporate profits are at records. The top of the K is doing great. The bottom of the K is collapsing. And social media is amplifying this divide in ways we've never seen before. X, formerly Twitter, is now a real-time sentiment tracker of economic despair. You see thread after thread of people saying they make $80K and can't afford rent. People with college degrees working 2 jobs and still broke. Families choosing between groceries and healthcare. This isn't anecdotal anymore. This is 50% of the country, and they're getting angrier. Bank of America's research shows something really concerning. Consumer spending is splitting. The top quintile is spending like 2019, taking vacations, dining out, buying luxury goods. The bottom 3 quintiles are cutting everything. switching to cheaper groceries, skipping medical appointments, delaying car repairs, one unexpected bill, and they're in crisis mode. This is the K-shape in consumer behavior. And it's accelerating because the bottom is running out of options. Savings rates are near zero for most Americans. The pandemic savings are gone. Credit cards are maxed. There's nothing left to cut. So what happens next? Let me show you the 3 scenarios because this plays out in very specific ways. Scenario 1, the soft landing. This is what the Fed wants. Inflation comes down slowly, wages catch up, the bottom of the K stabilizes, the gap stops widening. For this to happen, we'd need wage growth to exceed inflation for several years. We'd need housing costs to stabilize or fall. We'd need the job market to stay strong. Possible? Maybe? Likely? Probably not. Because the forces driving the K-shape are structural, not cyclical. Scenario 2, the crash. The bottom of the K collapses under debt. Delinquencies spike. Consumer spending falls. Businesses start failing. Unemployment rises. The economy tips into recession. Asset prices fall. The top of the K comes down to meet the bottom. Everyone's poor, but at least the gap closes. This is what happened in 2008. The K-shape collapsed and reset. It took years to recover. Scenario 3, and this is what I think is most likely the permanent divide. The K-shape becomes permanent. 2 separate economies that never reconnect. The top 20% live in one America. Good jobs, rising wealth, comfortable lives. They shop at Whole Foods, live in nice neighborhoods, send kids to good schools. The bottom 80% live in another America. Paycheck to paycheck, rising debt, constant stress. They shop at Dollar General, live in declining neighborhoods, struggle with everything. And the gap keeps widening until we look like a developing country with a small wealthy elite and a massive struggling working class. That's where we're headed. And the data suggests we're already there. Now let me show you what this means for you specifically, because this isn't abstract. This affects your decisions right now. If you're on the top of the K, if you own assets, your strategy is simple. Keep buying assets. Every dip is a gift. Accumulate stocks, real estate, businesses. Inflation is your friend. Debt is your friend. You're playing a different game and winning. If you're on the bottom of the K, you're fighting for survival. And the playbook is completely different. First, you need to understand you're not crazy. You're not failing. The system is rigged against you right now. Prices went up faster than wages. That's not your fault. Second, you need to stop playing the game the top of the K plays. Don't take on debt to buy stuff. Don't try to keep up with people who have assets. You're in a different economy. Third, your only path out is acquiring assets. Any assets, even small ones, even if it takes years. Let me be specific about this because it matters. If you're renting, buying a house seems impossible. Prices are up 40%, rates are 7%, you need 20% down. It's brutal. But do everything possible to buy something, anything. A small condo, a house in a cheaper area, move to a lower cost city if you have to, because rent is pure wealth destruction and it's only getting worse. If you can't buy real estate, buy stocks, even if it's $50 a month into an index fund, even if it feels pointless, because asset ownership is the only thing that protects you from inflation. If you can't do either, invest in skills. Learn something that pays more. Tech, healthcare, finance, sales. Get on the other side of the K through income growth. The bottom line is this. The middle class, as we knew it, is disappearing. You're either moving up into the asset-owning class, or you're sliding down into the permanent renting class. There's no standing still anymore. The K forces you to pick a side. Now let's talk about what this means politically, because this is driving everything you see in elections and policy. The K-shaped economy is creating K-shaped politics. People on the top of the K vote for policies that protect asset prices. Low taxes on investments, support for housing values, pro-business regulations. People on the bottom of the K vote for populism, both left and right. They want someone to blame. They want someone to fix it. They're angry and desperate. This is why politics feels so divisive right now, because it's not about ideas anymore. It's about which side of the K you're on. The top of the K wants stability and growth. The bottom of the K wants revolution and change. And neither side can understand the other because they're literally living in different economies. Here's what really concerns me. Throughout history, when wealth gaps get this wide, bad things happen. Revolutions, authoritarian movements, social collapse, Weimar Germany, 1930s, America, 1789, France. When the gap between rich and poor becomes unbearable, societies break. We're not there yet. But we're heading that direction faster than anyone wants to admit. The K-shaped economy isn't sustainable. At some point, the bottom either catches up or the top comes down. And history suggests it's usually the latter. So what's the solution? How do we fix this? Honestly, I don't know if we can. The forces driving this are so large and so entrenched that individual policy changes probably won't matter. You'd need massive wealth redistribution, but the people with wealth control policy, so that's not happening. You'd need to stop inflating asset prices, but that would crash the economy, so that's not happening either. You'd need wages to outpace inflation for years, but corporations have no incentive to do that, so again, not happening. The K-shape is locked in, and the only question is whether you position yourself on the right side before it's too late. Let me tell you what I'm doing. Not financial advice, just what I'm seeing and acting on. I'm buying assets, any assets, stocks, real estate, businesses. Because I believe inflation isn't over. I believe the Fed will print again. And when they do, assets go up and cash loses. I'm avoiding debt for consumption. Car loans, credit cards, personal loans. That debt destroys you in a K-shaped economy. But I'm using debt for assets. Mortgages, business loans, anything that buys something that appreciates, that debt becomes wealth in an inflationary environment. I'm investing in skills, learning things that put me on the right side of the K. Because the job market is also K-shaped. Some jobs are protected and growing. Most jobs are stagnant and declining. And I'm preparing for scenario 3, the permanent divide, because I think that's where we're headed. The K-shape isn't temporary. It's not a phase of the recovery. It's the new structure of the American economy. There will be a wealthy class that owns assets and benefits from inflation, and there will be a working class that rents everything and gets destroyed by inflation. The middle ground is disappearing, and you need to decide which side you're going to be on. Here's what I want you to do right now. Look at your financial situation honestly. Are you on the top of the K or the bottom? Do you own a house? Do you have investments? Is your net worth higher than 2020? If yes, you're on the top. Your strategy is accumulate more assets. You're winning. Keep doing what you're doing. If no, you're on the bottom. Your strategy is survive and acquire assets at any cost. Cut spending. Increase income. Save ruthlessly. Buy something that appreciates. Because the K-shape is accelerating, and every year you wait, the gap gets wider and harder to cross. Consumer sentiment is at 1930s levels for a reason. Half the country is living through an economic depression, while the other half prospers. This isn't temporary. This isn't a rough patch. This is the new American economy. The K-shaped economy is crushing your future if you're on the wrong side. And the only way out is to fight your way to the other side before the gap becomes uncrossable. The data is clear. The trend is obvious. The choice is yours. Which side of the K will you be on?